Turning now to Idaho, where self-proclaimed doomsday prophet Chad Daybell returns to court tomorrow for a motions hearing.
On the docket are discussions about whether cameras will be allowed during his trial and also the state's request for a change of venue.
Daybell is charged with the murders of his first wife, Tammy, along with Tylee and JJ, the children of his current wife, Lori Vallow Daybell. Court TV's own Ted Rowlands has more on the case.
Chad Daybell grew up in the LDS Church in Springfield, Utah. And according to Chad, in his teens, he became sort of a prophet.
The way he described it was that his veil was more open than it had been.
Daybell met his first wife, Tammy Douglas, while in college. He was a part-time gravedigger. During their marriage, they would have 5 children. The couple also founded a book company through which Chad published many religious books.
I've recently released my autobiography entitled Living on the Edge of Heaven, where I tell more about my 2 near-death experiences.
Chad Daybell claimed he had visions of the future and heard a voice that guided him. He told followers he knew the end of the world was coming and that evil zombies were taking over some people's bodies.
Chad's been a very prolific author, so in the past I would say a lot of his publications are very much in the mainstream, but it does seem that their trajectory seems to be taking them away from the kind of center where most people in the faith would have.
Chad would meet Lori Vallow in 2018. They had an affair, and she became a dedicated follower of his cult-like group. The next year, Chad's wife Tammy died in her sleep.
I begged her to go to the doctor. Her heart was failing her. She was physically falling apart.
Chad is now charged with Tammy's murder. 2 weeks after her death, on November 5th, 2019, he and Lori were married. Within 7 months, Chad and Lori Daybell would both be jailed for the murders of her children and his wife. The remains of Lori's daughter, Tylee, and son, JJ, were found in Chad's backyard.
On behalf of Mr. Daybell, we will enter a plea of not guilty to all of the charges.
All right, still with us, Nima Romani. And Nima, look, we're going to get to some of the issues being discussed here in the motions, but the question I have is, what is this defense going to look like? Just recently, he requested from the judge the opportunity to talk to his wife. She's still his wife, so she can't be compelled to testify. And do you think this is going to be about, and I have a tendency to think it might be, about her being the driving force behind this, maybe in some attempt to get him off of the death penalty?
I think so, Michael, and we've seen that in some of the pretrial motions where they're saying, look, the state of Idaho, they said that, you know, Lori was the ringleader and she should be convicted. And now they're taking an inconsistent approach. Now, of course, I'm a former prosecutor. I don't agree with that, but there's going to be a lot of finger pointing in this case because, let's be honest, we don't know whether it was Chad or Lori who killed the kids and buried them in the backyard. Obviously, when you're charging conspiracy, you don't have to prove that, but I think that's really the only defense here, and we saw a preview of it already.
Nima, I got to check in quickly. You said you don't agree with this idea. One of the arguments they're making is they want to preclude the state from arguing that he's the protagonist after having already argued that Lori was it. And you say, as a former prosecutor, you disagree with the idea that prosecutors should have the ability to do that.
Oh, I think they should be able to make inconsistent arguments at the end of the day. No, this was a case that was severed at the defense request. And, you know, what they argue in one trial doesn't necessarily lock them into a second. The defendant, you know, when there's a retrial, they can make different arguments all the time. So just to be clear, I think the state can make slightly inconsistent arguments. And frankly, when it's a conspiracy case, it doesn't matter. They don't have to actually, you know, convince the jury who's the one that actually, you know, pulled the trigger or stabbed someone or whatever the case may be.
All right, so I do wonder if the defense is kicking themselves because now they are faced with this particular issue of the state arguing the same thing they argued as to Lori. But let's put that aside. I want to put a pin in that for just a moment and talk about the death penalty, because we know with Lori, death penalty was taken off the table for the right to a speedy trial issue, right, and discovery. So do you think there's any opportunity for any argument to be made that could take the death penalty off of the table for Chad?
I would hope and think that the state would comply with its discovery obligations this time. It's really, really a pet peeve of mine as a prosecutor. Like, turn everything over. Defense lawyers have a right to it under case law, Supreme Court precedent, statute. Just give it up. And the fact that they didn't do so in a timely manner in a case that they were investigating for so long really is mind-boggling. It just really shows how poorly the case was handled before trial. In the trial, they did a good job, even though there was no real defense there. But again, I don't think that the state's errors in Lori's case prejudice them or prevent them from pursuing the death penalty in Chad's case, right? This is really a death penalty case. We have pictures on the screen. I mean, 2 children killed by their parents, you know, a step-parent, a biological parent. I mean, what worse crime is there? If you believe in the death penalty, this is a death penalty case.
All right, and finally, Nima, the state is asking for a change of venue. We know it was moved to Ada County. Now they're asking it to be moved further east, back closer to Fremont County. What do you think a judge might do under those circumstances?
Yeah, it's really strange. You know, the state usually doesn't make those types of motions. They don't try to get judges, change venues, different jury pools. If you're the state, you should be prepared to prosecute the case wherever you can find a fair and impartial jury. So a rare change of venue motion by the prosecution, you don't typically see that.
All right, Nima Rahmani, thank you, of course, as always, for joining us. Especially great to get perspective as a former federal prosecutor, because all these motions, they really dictate what's going to happen at trial,
Absolutely,
Michael.
as we've said many, many times. All right.